Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. Our show is brought to you by Whoop. Start tracking your strain, recovery, and sleep scores today. To get your hands on a free strap and an extra month's membership, make sure to click the link in our description. On today's episode, we have Brian Friend and Chase Ingraham here to discuss if there's Chase. If the Rogue Invitational is more or less interesting without Tia-Clair Toomey, Mal O'Brien, Brooke Wells, Haley Adams. We see both of our rosters right now. And Brian, you and I have talked about how the women's field looks vastly different than the men's field. So the women's podium, it's wide open. Rogue's going to crown a new champion. What are our thoughts on that? Will that bring more eyeballs to watch?
Cancel it. Just call it. I'm just kidding.
It's done.
Do not clip that and then get me in trouble on Instagram. No,
that's what we're going to promote.
The question always has been for the last 6 years, and I've heard Brian answer this question a lot, is that when I look at my own personal sports fandom, I love dynasties. I love seeing records get broken or extended, but at the same time, I do like seeing someone take down the dynasty, the champion, break another record. And we've had this question is, what's the landscape going to look like without Tia Toomey in the field? Now we have an opportunity. Yes, Mal O'Brien's not going to be there as well. Okay, well, we said last year, well, she's clear and head of the heir apparent, so to be. It's like, take her out of the mix too. Let's see who's out there. Let's see who's out there in the mix on the women's field and what that future may look like without Tia Toomey. I don't think it's less exciting at all. Yes, some of the big fun names are not going to be there, but we still have some great athletes in the mix and some new ones as well. And I'm just as excited to see what the new blood or that new landscape is going to look like without some of these top contenders there at Rogue.
I don't think it's such a loss necessarily not having Tia there. Eventually you can only do this for so long. And we saw with Fraser, he definitely could have kept going, but it's very hard. And people are always asking, why did Rich step away from individual? I mean, he said it a million times, the toll it takes on you mentally, physically, emotional, everyone to just do that year after year. So Tia out of the equation obviously opens up a ton of opportunity for a lot of the women. And I think this is kind of balanced on a knife's edge kind of conversation, because I'd love to see just the full field without her in it and see what happens. But the fact that we don't have the full field and we have athletes like Haley Adams, who's been seeking an elite level podium, maybe this could have been our chance, but she's not showing up to compete. She's focusing on next year's games. And we have Mal O'Brien, who might be the favorite to win this if Tia wasn't in the field, but she's not showing up. And she also is taking this offseason to improving it better and focusing on next year's games. What that means is that we're going to learn a lot about a lot of athletes this weekend when Rogue finally comes around, including some new ones and some very exciting ones. In particular, I think, Annika Greer and Olivia Kerstetter are two names that people are really excited to see in this field of women. And then we'll have some data points for them, some data points for some of these others. How will Gabby McGowan bounce back from a less than desirable finish at the games? Is Annie still a top contender? How, will Laura just ascend and dominate everyone as some people are expecting her? There's so many cool storylines. And we still won't know how Mal would have done. We still won't know how Haley or Brooke or Christy might have done. And that just leaves more and more excitement and opportunity as the offseason and next season develop.
As both of you, as sports analysts, though, Brian, you talk about the data that we'll have after here. Is this going to be accurate data from the Rogue Invitational without those other women in the mix?
I think relevant data for sure. Accurate. Yeah, of course, if we see a certain event show up that we know that Haley Adams would be great at, or Christy or whomever would do very well in, we can just assume, yes, they would have done well and factored into the top couple of positions there. But there's almost not what I'm looking for. What I'm more looking for is what's the mindset that these women have, because it's really difficult to sit there and say, as Laura Horvath or Gabby McGowan or Annie Thorzett, all these athletes that have been trying to catch Tia for years. Anyone who's serious about this sport is showing up to the games to win the games. We know that you have to say that. We know that you have to convince yourself to believe that, but did they really ever think they could win? I'm not sure. Now there's a half dozen women on this list that definitely believe they can win. And it's a lot no one's ever won the Rogue Invitational besides Tia on the women's side. It's the second biggest prize purse available. It's a great opportunity. I'm sure there's sponsorship opportunities involved with that going forward that come out of winning such an event. And they have a legitimate reason to believe it. So I'm curious to see their facial expression, the way they attack workouts, the way they carry themselves throughout the week changes without her there.
I like what Brian's saying is relative data, but you are going to get accurate data because when we look at the sport of CrossFit, though we compare them against each other, it's still an individual sport. So it doesn't matter what you do relative to the competition because of a stat in an off-season competition. What I'm looking for, like Brian, is like, has Laura fixed some holes that hopefully will get tested in Rogue? That is accurate data that I want to know to see how her off-season is shaping up to go into the regular season. What does Olivia Kerstetter look like in a field of elite individual women? How is she going to handle that pressure situation? What is Annika Greer going to turn into now she's in live competition with a big field? Is Annie back? Is she better than where she was last year at the Rogue Invitational? You're going to get a lot of accurate data on the individual performances, maybe not say relative to the field, because it really doesn't matter. It's like, hey, Tia Beach at the Rogue Invitational, you got 5th there. I'm not taking that 5th place and using it as a point that I'm trying to make, say, when I'm analyzing an athlete's off season for the CrossFit Games. What I'm going to look at, has Annie improved on X, Y, and Z that always kind of kept her out of contention, right? Is there a pressure situation event again at the game, at the Rogue Invitational, where she doesn't miss a snatch going in, right? Has she fixed those holes, as well as all athletes in the women's field? So those are the things that you can always take away from the competition as far as accurate data on an individual basis.
Do either of you want to give your early predictions on who's going to win the Rogue Invitational?
Yeah, I can't wait to do that and just have everybody tell me how wrong I was. They do that anyways.
Well, I mean, it is fun to talk about who's going to win. I think I'll reserve a comment on that for a little later on, but I think just as exciting in a situation like this is to see what athletes who surprised us this past summer at the games end up doing now that they realize they can actually do this. And we kind of saw that with Medeiros last year. A lot of people were like, man, he had a perfect run at the games. He didn't make a single mistake. Vellner was still really close. I think Vellner might be able to get him at Rogue, though, and this is going to set up this battle. That's not what happened. Justin came and did the exact same thing at Rogue. No mistakes, won again. This year, you have athletes like Emma Lawson and Alexis Raptis, who are rookies at the games. Both managed to finish in the top 10. You know, if you asked them before the games, do you guys feel like you're a top 10 games athlete? They would say, I'm not sure. You know, they might say, like, I want to believe I can, but until you do it, you don't know. Now they've done it. Is that going to be a confidence booster? Are we going to see even better versions of them? Or was that kind of a one-off? And this is going to be maybe a bit of a regression. So those types of questions are the things that I'm most interested in when I look at this women's field.
Just to make note, I'm pretty sure I had Alexis Raptis and Emma Lawson in my top 10 for my picks for the games.
I had one.
Very good one. Very good.
You crushed us on the women's side. Crushed it.
Why? In what scenario would this field be less interesting? We've kind of talked about why this is really interesting, but in what scenario are people like, well, now they're out, I don't care anymore?
I would say from the in-person spectator side, because people want to come see Tia-Clair Toomey. They want to see Haley, Mao, Brooke. I mean, these are some of our most famous athletes, male or female, in the world in our sport. So maybe from the in-person side, I could see there being a little bit of a letdown or a little bit of a ho-hum, because people will show up to competitions, not even care what's going on the competition floor or what the programming is or who's there. They just want to come see their favorite athlete. And those 4 are your pretty much top 4 of maybe the top 5 favorite athletes in the entire world that won't be there. So I could see from the in-person perspective, that may be that less exciting part for those that are there to just watch those athletes themselves.
Yeah, excellent point. And Rogue is a very, intimate setting. It's the smallest, really elite competitive field that we'll see in 20. And you do, it's not like a Wodapalooza or a Madrid where you have heats of 20 and it's hard to tell what's going on anyway. I mean, this is if you are going to be there in person, a great opportunity to see the best athletes and your favorite athletes up close with the spotlight on them, do their thing, and kind of feel like you're a part of that. So definitely a valid point from Chase's perspective for people who are like really, really big fans of a particular huge name in the sport.
Chase, what's your bottom line?
Bottom line, as a fan of the sport itself and competition, I'm just as excited with or without Tia. I'm curious to see how these new athletes, right, that didn't get to compete at the games, whether they were teen or just didn't make it, mix it back up. Obviously, Annie being in the mix is very exciting. So as a fan of just the overall competition, I think there's still a lot you can look forward to when it comes to this. I do see the in-person experience for the casual fan of certain athletes being less exciting than the others that are there for the competition itself.
Brian, what's your bottom line?
I mean, that thing we're talking about with the fan experience being a little less, I think, is small compared to the plethora of great stories that will be going on here on the women's side and the stories that they'll set up for the next 12 months. Additionally, don't forget, there still is the men's field where all 15 of the top 15 men
Yes.
signed up, plus some pretty good names out of the qualifier. So there's certainly no shortage of big names that will still be competing in Austin.
Ooh, I can't wait to watch. Brian, Chase, thank you guys for chatting with us, and we'll see you next time.